Hey everyone, welcome to the official Outlander podcast, the Droughtlander version. I'm Matt Roberts. I'm an executive producer on Outlander and writer, and I'm here with my two special guests, Guy Tannehill and Michael Wilson. Guy, hello. Why don't you
Hello.
tell us what you do for the show?
Always a problem. I help produce the show, which is dealing with cast, actors, budget, general help in terms of running the show. That's pretty much my job. I'm responsible to deliver quality within budget.
Within budget is the key, I think, there. And Michael Wilson, you've been with us from day one. You've kind of come up the ranks. So you tell us what you do and kind of where you came from.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, I started as production manager on season one, working alongside David Brown, kind of as his wingman, I suppose, and then latterly have become Guy Tannehill's wingman. It's like I like to think of myself. Basically, Guy just gets me to do all the dirty work. You know, I have to have the difficult conversations. Yeah.
Well, there in a production in Scotland, there's definitely a lot of dirty work to do.
Yeah, there certainly is.
Yeah.
It's a hard graft. I mean, we do whatever the scripts, tell us to do, really, and that's it. We're responding to the material, and we're working closely with all of the heads of department to try and find a way to do it. And Outlander as a show presents us every season with new challenges, like how are we going to shoot ships traveling across the ocean? How are we going to shoot, buffaloes charging at Brianna and throwing her in the air? All of those things are the kind of conversations that we are coordinating alongside a panel of experts who are our heads of department, costume designer, production designer, visual effects. We sit down with those guys on a daily basis and solve problems. It's what we do.
Yeah. That's the nutshell version. I know there's a lot more detail that goes in. On one of the podcasts we were trying to describe how many meetings we go to prior to the first day of shooting. And I could probably, I would say thousands, with the phone calls and now Zooms, but sit down meetings. There are days where you just go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. And especially on a beast show like this. So as you know, I don't, or you may not know, we take on the Droughtlander version of the podcast, we take questions from the fans off of social media. So we're going to jump into some of those right now, and you guys can answer. How did you come into this profession? What type of schooling internship preps you for this job title? Guy, why don't you start?
I came into it quite late in life, and it was back in the day when there was no formal schooling. You learned by experience. You started from the bottom. You spent some time working on that position. Your senior recommended you or didn't recommend you for another job, and you made your way up. So it was kind of like an apprenticeship. So I bumped into the industry because it wasn't really a proper job when I started. It wasn't something that you could do at university or have any courses, but which I, again, am fairly suspicious of. I think the best route to learning how to become a producer or anybody else in the industry, for that matter, is through experience, by learning off other people and coming along at your own pace. So that's really that's how I came about it, because there was no real formal introduction to the work as a job or a career.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, when people ask me that question, I always say, get a job in the industry, however you can, and then you'll find the path. And there's just as many jobs there's a million paths to get, to keep growing in this industry. There's no set path. Michael, how about you?
I did do courses, university courses, which sent me in that direction. I mean, I think I started off not knowing what I wanted to do, like a lot of people when I left school. I always had an interest in film and TV. And on my degree, on my undergraduate course, it was kind of an elective that we were allowed to pick up cameras and go out and play about with them sometimes and make short films. And then I decided to specialise off the back of my degree and went and did a masters in TV production. But I would echo what Guy said and say you don't really learn on those courses. You get some basic tools off those courses, but really you learn when you come into the industry. And my first job in the industry was, as most people, you start at the bottom, and I was working in the production department as a production runner, and you're photocopying scripts and you're making cups of tea and you're absorbing, you're watching the people around you, seeing what they do, and if they think you can photocopy a script, then they might throw you a little bit more responsibility. If they think you can make a good cup of tea, then they'll throw you a little bit more responsibility. And that's really what it's about. It's about getting a leg on the ladder and just proving that you can do small tasks, that you can do them well and do them to a high standard, and then people will start to throw you a line and give you more to do. And that's what it's been like. I think even for the first kind of 10 years I worked in the industry, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what department I wanted to be in. And in many ways, I was resisting production. I was really interested in going into editing because that was the thing I'd done at university that I most enjoyed. But people kept offering me jobs in the production department, and you kind of go, well, I need a paycheck at the end of the week to pay the rent.
Yeah.
And it kind of found me. I was seriously thinking about a career change. I'd got to production coordinator level, and then the producer I was working with at that time asked me to production manage a job, and it was never something I thought I'd want to do. In fact, I used to look at production managers and think that's got to be the worst job in the world.
It is.
It is. But I started doing it, and what it did was it got me closer to the interesting bit of the job, which is working with the creative heads of department. And I think once I started production managing, then I did go, okay, I can see a future in production, because suddenly I had a bit more.
It's a good point. You come into the industry knowing nothing, and you can think that you definitely want to be so-and-so. You want to do this job, but in fact, you're completely off because you don't know what you're talking about. And when you get there, you suddenly find, oh, well, actually, I want to be in this department, not that department. And you find your niche that way.
And
I think it does actually sometimes you find out because it's so varied in this industry. There's so many different jobs. Sometimes you find out that you are talented in something you didn't even know you were talented in until someone throws it. And there is a lot of pressure, time pressure and money pressure in this business. So pressure always reveals, to me, that's what reveals character, but it also reveals talent too. And sometimes you put someone under a lot of pressure, and we give people jobs to do, and some people just shine, and you go, hey, you're really good at this. Do you want to keep doing it? And so sometimes it actually finds them. I'm going to move on to another question here. How many members are on the prep team, and what are their various duties?
Yeah, it's a sliding scale. It ramps up. So it's hard to give a definitive number, but it can start with as few as 2 or 3 people talking about early scripts or storylines and working out how things could progress, which then fills as more information comes in. You could be 20 people in production or 5 people. It depends at what point in production you're at.
Even as once the shoot's up and running, we're not even at full capacity, because what we tend to do in Outlander is by the end of the shoot, we're kind of often running 2 units. So we'll have a second unit working alongside. We'll bring additional people into the team to help do that. As a base number of crew, we kind of average, once we're up and running and filming, something like 300 is a rough base number for us. But as you guys know, we can do, sometimes we step in and we do a big battle scene or a big crowd scene on the streets of Wilmington, for example, and we've got an extra 25 makeup artists and an extra 20 costume assistants and an extra 10 sparks and all of that stuff. So sometimes a shoot day can have 500 people just on the shooting unit.
We'll move on to how far in advance does production start before actual filming of a new season begins?
It's kind of changed, doesn't it, season to season, and it depends on what's our delivery schedule. When do the network want the show is one of the pressures that we've got to come to bear on our production schedule. But where the time allows, moving into season 7, we're allowing 5 months, the best part of 5 months for design to get started. We probably bring costume on 4 months, 3.5, 4 months out. And then as we move through the process, because those are the things that take the most time, is building the sets. Some of those sets take 3.5, 4 months to build the larger sets. And that's not including the concept work and the drawing up of those sets and deciding what they're going to be ahead of that. Costume takes time to build. Pretty much all of our 18th century costumes are being built from scratch. And so they've got to see the material, know what they need, and then start to work on that stuff. And then as we get closer to the shoot, we're obviously bringing on ADs, visual effects, shooting crew, and starting to get into the prep and the final planning for the season. So yeah, I'd say around about a 5-month window is a good time for us.
When the writers give you documents, because we try to keep you informed of where the story's going so you can make some of these decisions, you know, you can look at that and go, oh, we'll need 4 months or we'll need 6 months, because you really, with your experience, can go, this is going to take much longer to build, or these locations aren't going to be fine. So I find that invaluable. What is the first thing that is done in Scotland once you have a script for an episode? What tasks must be done first? I can tell you the first thing that's done from you guys say, hey, it's way too long. So now, what's the second thing you do, Guy Tannehill?
Well, it's back to prep again. It's two forms of prep: there's strategic prep and then there's tactical prep. By the time you've got your script, you're probably down to the tactical stuff. You've had the arguments about what's possible and what's not possible. And then, therefore, the next real functioning phase is to break the script down into its constituent elements, whether you need crowd, whether you need building, whether you need sets, whether you need locations, etc. And you break it down and start putting together a schedule to shoot it with, so that you can then plan in detail for the actual shoot.
Even we overlap seasons. So we're talking about in season 6, we were talking about season 7. In season, being vice versa, we're always way ahead. So we have, meetings every week to talk about what's coming and what's coming and what's coming. And I think if we didn't do that, we would never be able to produce this show. Let me ask another question here. How do you work together with the other departments?
Costume and design have to have a real head start on everyone else. So you need to tie down what sets you're going to build, where you're going to put your efforts early on when you look at those scripts, and decide what's the big time-consuming things we have to get into. The other things that jump out of the script are the complex sequences. So if you're going to burn down the print shop, or you're going to do buffaloes or locusts or something like that, it's part of the process of breaking down that script and putting it into a schedule. You have to start going, well, where's that going to happen? What elements are going to be CGI, visual effects? What elements are going to be practical? Can we even do that practically? How do we do that practically? So as soon as we start digging into those scripts and we find those particularly complex sequences, we're sitting down with the other departments, discussing them. And as you say, depending on the complexity, some of those scenes that we've shot on Outlander over the years have taken hundreds of meetings, just to nail down the plan for a single scene. And those plans constantly evolve. Well, maybe we should bring in a VFX vendor to talk to us about what they could bring to the table. Maybe we're going to talk to a prosthetics expert and see what they can bring to the table, or whatever it is. We're constantly working with the people around us, their expertise, and asking them for ideas. And part of the job, I suppose, of producers, all of us involved, is somebody said you ask them to give you their best ideas, and then you pick which ones you think make most sense, with time, motion, and money all being the key deciding factors.
Yeah, because departments can have different views. They can think in their way, they think in their corner, and your job is to bring together all the corners for the best possible outcome. Mm-hmm. And that can mean overruling other people.
Well, yeah, and like you said, I know I have, fantastic ideas, and then I get them to you, and you guys are going, we can't produce something like that.
Well, what we say, it is a fantastic idea first, and then we say we can't do it.
Yeah. That is exactly how it goes. It is true, and then there's other times. I think this is where the experience is invaluable. Is something on the page, whether it be from the book or a script, early stages, we'll throw it to production and you guys, yeah, that we can't do that, but you guys can come up with alternatives and go, but we can give you this. And that's where a lot of times HODs can do that, or you guys can do that. And you go, hey, but we know this place that can give you the feeling of what's in the script. Not exactly, but close. And I think over the course of the years, it's been invaluable that you guys have had that experience and been able to give alternatives to be able to create this show. And I mean, just the other day when we were scouting and we're walking through that path and we're looking for something for season 7, I'm not going to tell anybody what it is, but I come around this corner and I go, wow, where did you guys find this? And it's time and time again, it's things like that are so impressive. I just, probably whet the audience appetite there, but I was blown away. So I hope we get to use it. Let's see, where are we? How often do the producers have to go back to the writers for changes because of logistics? How many times have you gotten a script and said, hey, we're going to have to make some changes in this script because I don't have that many fingers and toes to count how many times that happens during a script and a season. So
it's always a discussion, isn't it? Yeah. It's a cooperation. It's a conversation. I would have said actually less than you're thinking in my head.
I'm thinking over the course of kind of my career, because that's what happens. We have a half page, maybe 2 to 3 hours work at this remote location. Can we somehow adjust this or either put more stuff there so we can spend a full day out there, or can we move this location to someplace else so we can get a full day's work? To me, that's just how it works. So
it can be as simple as a day or a night. Can you make this scene day, because that way we're shooting in the summer and we've got no darkness left, and can we make it a day scene because and that way you put together a day's schedule.
I found that working on UK TV shows before I came on to Outlander, that there wasn't that same dialogue. And that's the thing I think I found most impressive about the US model, is that we always have a writer producer on set who's working closely with the director, because they've got the overview of the season. The director comes in, they've got a couple of episodes that they're working on, but they don't know what's going to happen 5 episodes down the line. They don't know what happened 12 episodes ago as intimately as the story team do. And all of the producing writers that we've worked with have got so much practical experience of what it's like to make shows that they really do work in collaboration with us. And I found in a lot of UK shows, there wasn't that collaboration. The script was handed to you and you had to fight for a dialogue about what would make that script better from a production point of view. And we've never had to fight for that dialogue. That dialogue is part and parcel of the discussion. It's there from day one right through. And I think it's a brilliant way to work, because ultimately what you're always trying to do is to make it to give as much time as possible to the departments to do their best work, to give as much time as possible to the director and the actors to do their best work. And the best way to do that is to have a dialogue with them about what's going to make their life simpler, rather than just handing them a script and saying it's a fait accompli. Yeah. So I think it works really well in Outlander.
Yeah, and we try to, certainly there are certain things that we ask for and say, well, this is a must. We must have that dress, or we must have that, certain prop or whatever. But then there's a lot of times where you go to props or costume or production design and say, what do you see this as? And then they design it and they use all their talents to bring it to screen, and they're giving Outlander a little bit of themselves, and I think that's very important, and that's one of the reasons why I think Outlander is one of the best produced shows on television, in the sense of the production value that we get is amazing, and the detail that we get, and people take so much pride in those little elements, and I think that's because we as producers allow them to bring their talents to bear on the show. So Let's see what's the next question. Do you plan your shoots and locations with an A, B, and C, etc. plan to account for weather and other uncontrollable circumstances?
We do plan an ABC method, but we also have to plan for weather and have backup plans to deal with the unexpected, because you plan for the worst and hope for the best. But generally, if you're not flexible, you're doomed. You've got to bend with the wind on some cases with things that you've got no control over. An actor could go sick. A tree could blow over. You know, there's stuff that can interfere with your perfect plan. And if you expect it to run perfectly, then you're in trouble.
There are some scenes that you kind of say, we can shoot this, you know, all but a biblical storm, this is going to be fine. But there are sequences like the wedding, you know, Brianna and Roger's wedding. You don't want to shoot that on a miserable, wet, dreich Scottish day. So what you do is you build into your schedule weather cover, and you know that 3-4 days in advance, if you see the rains are coming, you're going to pull weather cover, you're going to go into the studio. Sometimes you're making that decision quite late in the day because the forecasts, as everybody knows, are unreliable, particularly when there's a front coming in. You don't know if it's going to hit on Wednesday or Thursday. So we're in constant dialogue with the crew. And you can imagine the implications for the crew when they're trying to prep something like the wedding that's got loads of food and it's got extras and it's got all kinds of stuff going on, special effects and all kinds of people that are coming in, especially for that shoot day. What you have to do is you have to book those people out for longer periods of time. You have to have your cast penciled in for longer periods so that you've got the flexibility to be able to book them in. And that, I mean, on a day-to-day basis, myself and the ADs and Guy are in a constant dialogue, particularly during the winter, about weather, looking at our apps, making decisions, which, you know, we'll send out the weather call, and the crew are incredibly quick to act, and they'll push buttons and phone people and change it all around at the push of a button. But yeah, we're constantly juggling balls on Outlander, and not just weather cover, but things like we want to shoot a scene on the river, and we can only do it if the river's at a certain height, and the river goes up and down like crazy. And we've had river cover scenarios. We were shooting the scenes on the ships in South Africa, and there was a whole episode called The Doldrums, where it's supposed to be no wind whatsoever. And of course, we were shooting in one of the windiest places on earth,
Right.
Cape Town Film Studios.
They actually had a name for the afternoon wind that came. I can't remember what it was, but they gave it a name. It was so regular, and we're like, yeah, let's shoot during that.
Yeah, so you're suddenly in a scenario of looking at the wind forecast and having to jump in and out of different scenes and pulling in different actors at short notice and all of that stuff. So yeah, we're constantly juggling balls. There's always lots of different scenarios in our schedule, and part of the experience of a show like Outlander is you have to be prepared for everything, for the worst possible scenario.
Like this year, I think weather-wise, we got hit with quite a bit of snow and cold. COVID pandemic kind of pushed us to the point where we had to start in January rather than what we originally thought. So we ended up having a lot of night and cold weather, and you know, the crew had to deal with that, and the production teams had to deal with that. So again, those are things that you can only plan for. Is, you know, practically when you have to stand in it is tough too. So you know what I mean? We did it though. We did.
We're not a show that is set in a studio set. You know, two people talking over a dining room table. We're out and about everywhere, and big crowd scenes, small scenes, interiors, exteriors, up mountains, on rivers. You know, so it's a varied and interesting show to work on.
So, apart from the weather, what challenges do you face shooting in Scotland versus if you were to shoot the show elsewhere?
We're quite far north, so in the middle of winter, we're kind of losing daylight by 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon sometimes. And in the middle of summer, we're struggling to get any night at all. You know, it's 10, 11 o'clock before it gets dark and the sun's back up again at 3:30, 4 in the morning. So one of the challenges to shooting in the north of Scotland is that, you know, Matt serves us up a 5-page scene set at night and we're shooting in the middle of summer, we're saying to Matt, I'm really sorry, but we either have to shoot that over 4 consecutive nights or we're just not going to have enough night time to shoot it. So that's one of the things.
I would say in the past, Scotland has been a challenge because of the availability of skilled crew. But I think Outlander has changed that enormously over the years. And there are many crews out there now that have cut their teeth working on a Outlander show. So it's become easier to crew up in Scotland than it used to be.
I agree. You know, definitely when we first got there, we found, you know, we got our initial crew, but any additional crew we were always bringing up, you know, bringing from different places. And then over the years, now we're seeing, I'm seeing people, I'm walking by crew that were runners and now I see them pulling focus, you know what I mean? And you see them in different places, all, you know, all over our crew. And that to me is, I'm so proud that we do that. We, you know, build from within and you know, Michael, you're a great example and of that. So, yeah, I think that's getting easier, but yes, the challenges of night and day. But I will say that the quality of the light when you have it in Scotland is unparalleled. It's so beautiful. It's just such a beautiful light that turns the show into something magical where you don't get that in other places. It's just a harsher, different kind of light. And you can tell filming in Los Angeles, the light is just different than it is in Scotland. And it kind of shows. Let's see. In the first year, what was the biggest challenge you found to make such a big production in Scotland? When the series ends, what do you think will be your legacy for the locals? I guess this one's for Michael because Guy wasn't with us on the first year. I think we kind of halfway answered this initially, is getting the crew together, but also getting the studio ready. But you know,
Yeah.
Those are my two biggest. But what was yours, Michael?
Nobody had done anything of this scale in Scotland before, so there were particular departments. And we got a lot of fantastic technicians who'd spent their careers working in London or working abroad, and so it was brilliant to bring those people back, but there still weren't enough. And there were things like we hadn't built costumes from scratch in Scotland before, so we did have to import staff, particularly on season 1, and we had to train people up. And as you say, that's been a process that you don't bring somebody in as a trainee on season 1 and they're immediately stepping up to costume design on season 2. It's something that happens over a 2 or 3 year period, but all of those or many of those people we brought in absolutely stepped up to that plate. And I'd say by season 2 we'd phased out a lot of the crew that we had to bring in, fly in from London, from elsewhere. I don't even remember, on season 1 we had to bring in a whole team of Italians to build costumes for us. At one point we brought in a team of electricians from Prague just because we couldn't find the crew locally and couldn't even find it elsewhere in the UK sometimes. So that was a huge challenge. And just building the studio. I mean, we did walk into a building which needed a huge amount of work. I think this studio will live beyond this production and hopefully for many, many years to come.
And we also have a skill set program where we just give people the opportunity to experience a production. You know, they come in for a certain amount of time and they get to bounce around in different departments to see what it's like. And I think that's a fantastic legacy that we have.
And the investment in the skills base, which we talked about, which is, I mean, our makeup team have said it to me time and time again, that like, sometimes you get to do a show with wigs on, for example, and you get to do some prosthetics and you get to dip your toe into things, but they're just doing it constantly every day to the point where you become an expert. I mean, for most of us who've been on since season 1, we've kind of done our 10,000 hours on Outlander. There's not much that the show hasn't thrown at us, and so you become whatever we throw them into. Whether you're aging the costumes, or putting on the wigs, or dealing with the prosthetics, or whatever it is. Those people have had so much experience now of how to do a high-end TV show of the highest quality to the highest production values. They've been given the time and the space and the resources to do those things over and over again now for 8 years. They've become experts, and those skills that the show's brought to Scotland, they're the real legacy, I think.
We'll move on to, for scouting locations, how is it done? How far in advance is it done? Logistics, dealing with authorities, landowners, etc.
Well, it's back to that part of prep, which is more strategic. It starts very early. The locations are very important in part of the production design overall for the episode and for the series. And it will drive us sometimes out of the studio because we found a much better location than we could build. So it has to be done upfront and early. There are a lot of logistics that have to be planned with locations about whether you can get in and get out safely, whether you can have a big enough footprint or a small enough footprint to work. And then there is, dealing with the landowners, the legal aspects, which have to be signed, sealed, contracts made, etc. So it's not a straightforward process, and it takes time and can't be rushed. So it's very early on you start working on locations.
In terms of landowners, we've got a brilliant track record. We've got an amazing locations department who take very good care of the places that we go into, and try and make sure that they're handled with kit gloves, and that we restore them and return them to the location owners in the condition that we get them in. And as such, we've built up a really good local reputation, and people kind of tend to welcome us in, which is fantastic because that doesn't always happen for film crews.
Well, and it certainly didn't happen, believe it or not, in the first season. It wasn't that we weren't welcome. It's just that we were in such an unknown.
Yeah.
And over the course of the years, I think the arms have just really opened up and very much welcomed us, rather than who are you guys, what are you guys doing, was more the first season.
That's right. I think as the reputation for the show has grown and the importance of locations to the show has grown, people now want to be involved in the show more often than not. And, the Outlander effect is a well-known thing, that many of the locations that we've gone and visited have seen, the historic Scotland locations, castles and country houses and estates have seen their visitor numbers just grow and grow and grow. And so from that point of view, it's been a brilliant boon for tourism and something that a lot of people are keen to encourage, which is good for us.
Yeah. And just, to give a little more of the actual process. So Donald, our amazing scout, will go out and give us options. And normally we'll sit in the locations department office, the three of us, and then Michael Hickson and Donald, and we'll go through all the photos. He took sometimes too rapidly. Donald has a trigger finger. He's a little quick on the presentation, and we tease him about it. But we go through hundreds of photos of the areas that he has actually gone out and scouted. And then when we will narrow it down to a select few, and then we'll go out and visit those, and walk with the production designer. That was, Gary Steele early on, and now it's Mike Gunn. And we just walk the walk. We call it walking the course, and you see if it'll work. Let's see what's the next question. Can you please talk a bit about how your previous prepping strategies have changed since COVID safety protocols?
It's added a whole layer onto how you can behave and how you can scout and how you can shoot. It's pervasive to all the corners of making movies. Making movies and COVID just don't go together very well. So a lot has had to move and change, but the basic thread of how we go about planning, prepping and shooting hasn't, but how we go about dealing with the layer that is COVID has added to that process.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. It's been a really tough season to get through because of COVID. Just from booking a crew member, you've got to have 2 COVID tests before you bring them into your bubble. We segregated our crew into cohorts so that if somebody did catch it or was in close contact with someone who'd had COVID, that it wouldn't bring down the whole crew. So what that meant was we couldn't interact in the way we normally interact. We couldn't sit down in the meeting room. We had to do everything over Zoom. You couldn't have those corridor conversations that you used to have and where you solve a lot of problems. So communication was impaired, just complexity. And you know, for the COVID team that we brought in, huge amount to deal with. We set up a lab. We were running 1,300 tests a week, I think, on average, just to keep people safe. And everybody rose to the challenge, and everybody was brilliant and worked really hard, but it just added a whole layer of complexity to everything that we do.
Just the grind of being tested all the time, you know, it just wears on you mentally and emotionally. So, you know, it was a challenge across the board, but, you know, my hat goes off to you guys and the cast and crew that had to endure it, to just bring us, bring the audience, you know, the 8 episodes that we're going to present this year. So how difficult is it to set schedules with actors such as Laura Donnelly and Stephen Cree and keep them as cast when their roles may skip seasons or episodes? Is it in their contract that they will work for the show for years, even if they are only in a few episodes?
It's sort of down to production value, availability of the actor. There's many facets to putting together a deal with an actor that expands beyond a day or a week.
And I think, you know, quite a bit is on the actor and their team. So, you know, to give 2 examples, you know, Laura and Stephen, you know, they had bigger parts in season 1, and the story dictated that we went away from their characters. So to retain them over 8 years is just impossible to do. One, for us and also for them. They're both very successful actors who've gone on to different things, different shows, different, you know, plays. And so for them themselves, they would want to do other things. So we can't just, you know, option them for the rest of their career thinking, oh, we might use them later on the show, which, you know, is, and I think to answer this a little more fully, that has happened to us before, where we want a character back and we've had such a, you know, a great actor playing that you don't think about going to somebody else, you know, and because they're just unavailable and they can't come back to the show because they're doing something else. So
Outlander can be the worst enemy, because you give a boost to somebody's career and actually they become less available for you later, which is a good thing. It is. Which is a good thing.
It is. It is a good thing. Guys, I have to say this was a fun podcast. We got, I think we answered all the questions that were given to me. I do have to say that you know, throughout the years that we've worked together, I have always been astonished by the amount of effort you guys put in and just your dedication to your particular jobs. I always think, you know, when somebody says, what does a producer do and what's the differences between the producers? That's hard to say, but I know that, you know, if you just take the word, is you kind of take nothing and you make something. And for you guys specifically, that's what you do. We give you a script and we give you the story, and then from that you cultivate it and you turn it into something, and it grows and it grows and it grows and becomes this beautiful thing. And I am so proud and honored to work with both of you guys. So you know, it has been my pleasure, and you know, it's going to continue. And so I thank you for doing the podcast, and I hope everybody enjoys it. So that's us on the official Outlander podcast, Droughtlander version. Enjoy. Say goodbye, guys.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.